Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining part 3 of our webinar series, Abdominal Pain, Anxiety, and How to Help Your Teen During COVID-19. I'm Georgia Weston. I'm the Executive Director of CHYP, Creative Healing for Youth in Pain. We're a nonprofit providing educational resources, exposure to creative healing experiences, and social support online. We offer regular chip chat programs for youth and parents to meet peers over Zoom and socialize with one another. We have creative healing workshops on the weekends to encourage self-expression through group activities. We host educational webinar series like this one to spread information on topics that families are dealing with right now. We have a research program that looks at the benefits of creative healing through different coping modalities. We have a summer camp that allows for a cohort to participate in creative healing activities together, all without having to leave your home because everything I just said is offered over Zoom. So if anyone has any questions about registering for programs, you can email admin@mychip.org. We have a great discussion lined up with your live Q&A questions. Please, everybody, if you can keep yourselves muted and your cameras off, we would appreciate that so we can all enjoy without distractions. You will be able to type in your questions through the Zoom chat throughout the discussion for our speakers to address. And now I am pleased to introduce CHYP's board member, Dana Pacholski, who will be moderating our conversation with our guest today, CHYP's founder and president, Dr. Lonnie Zeltzer. Dana also serves on the board of the UCLA Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital, is co-chair of the Regenerative Medicine Institute campaign for Cedars-Sinai, the vice chair of Cedars-Sinai's Innovation Center project for the Board of Governors, and is a board member for the Caton Children's Museum. Now I will hand it over to Dana to introduce Dr. Zeltzer and lead our discussion.
Welcome everybody and good morning. I see so many people back again for the third part of this, and we're really flattered that you've chosen to join us again. Most of you are aware of Dr. Zeltzer's incredible history helping and dedication helping children and their families through a variety of different pains. Dr. Zeltzer is the Distinguished Professor of Pediatrics, Anesthesia, and Psychiatry at UCLA, and she is the Director of the Pediatric Pain and Palliative She was the director of the Pediatric Pain and Palliative Pain Program for 30 years at UCLA. She's an invited member of committees through the NIH, CDC, and FDA. She's written over 400 scientific publications on pain and written the chapters for textbooks teaching cancer, pain, and pediatrics to just scratch the surface of her incredible career and dedication to kids. So welcome, Dr. Zeltzer. We are honored to be able to have this time with you and share your incredible expertise.
Great, thank you, Dana, and thank you everybody for coming, and I'm open for questions.
Well, I was really thinking about where to start because there's so many places we could go today. And I think if we take a few minutes to really talk about the brain and how the signals work, starting with the whole neuron connecting to the frontal lobe, and then we could go into more about the pain signaling. I think that would lay a great foundation for the rest of the hour.
Sure. I think I would start by saying most kids that by the time we see them, they've been told they've been having gazillion-dollar workup. They may have seen 40 different physicians, subspecialists, and they hear, we can't find a cause for your pain. And the message is, they think it's in my head, I'm making it up, I'm trying to get out of school, and kids don't feel believed, and it's very demoralizing. So in a sense, it's right, it's in the head, but we now know where it is in the brain. And as people have developed from monkeys all the way to humans, if you see pictures, our frontal area has gotten larger. It used to be flat foreheads because monkeys didn't have frontal lobes. The frontal lobe is really the new brain. And when people develop pain, especially pain that goes on and on, however it got started, we call it the smart brain pain syndrome, just like we learn other things by forming a neural loop, a connection, a highway, an electrical highway. And what we now know is there's a pain highway. So what started out as bottom up, you hurt your foot, but now the foot keeps hurting and the orthopedist can't find anything, the rheumatologist, but your foot's hurting, you can't stand on your foot. It's because the bottom up signaling became a top down signaling. And that's why we need to focus on this part of the pain signaling system to change that, change the pain.
So in essence, once the pain gets triggered, the brain remembers that, even though the physical reason why it was introduced as pain to the body has now gone.
Well, what started out, let's say, as a gastroenteritis, so it was a plumbing issue, or as a twisted ankle, it was a carpentry issue. After a while, it becomes an electrical issue. And that's why the doctors can't see it. And they say, we don't know, we don't see anything wrong, because we really need an electrical engineer to look at the wiring and the signaling in the system. And most tests don't show that.
And once we've done the prudent parent route of looking at different tests, and we've gotten past that, and our child now says, no one believes me, you don't believe me, we start to see the emotional side of pain, the anxiety or depression. And that leads us into some of the questions that I think are really important. The gut, right? We're talking about, basically, for most of these kids, the pain is located in the gut and or headaches. And that's the predominant. So I think for the purpose of everybody on today, those are fairly interchangeable with regards to how you're talking about pain and how you can help remedy that, correct?
Right. It's an up and down, pain signaling is an up and down system. And you have to think about it as a system, not a location in the body. So just as, if we said, okay, your whole nervous system is a computer, for me, I would turn it off and reboot it. Obviously, we can't do that, but also think about it as electrical signaling going down all the sensory nerves, sometimes motor nerves, down to your whatever part of the body is the difficult area. So if it's your intestinal tract, then you have nerves, motor nerves, going too fast or too slow, they're out of balance. All these electrical signals. If they go too fast, you get diarrhea. If the signals are too slow, you get constipation. And then you have sensory, carrying feeling, touch, feeling information. So your stomach begins to feel super sensitive. So normal, you eat something and normally it contracts. That's what stomachs need to do to break up the food to get into your intestine and get the nutrients. But normally we don't feel our stomach contracting as horrible pain. But if everything is so sensitive and all that electrical activity is there, it's painful with eating. And, if you have a smart brain, if every time you eat, you're hurt, then who wants to eat? And after a while, your brain makes you not feel hungry or fear eating because it's trying to protect you. And that's where we can talk about later our new frontal lobe, the smart part of the brain, not the reptilian brain, comes in.
And as you're talking about the stomach and the signaling, right, it really comes down to the signaling. And at CHYP, at Creative Healing for Youth in Pain, we've coined this term, right, of the sticky neural loop. Well, you have coined this term. And how do you unstick that? Really, at the end of the day, if we have overactive or underactive neurons firing, what can we do to help that, especially as parents watching our children suffer?
Right. So think about, a smart brain learns by making connections. And with our modern functional MRI and all of our new tools, we can actually see that new connection. We call it a connectome. And there's a pain connectome. We know where in the brain that is. And think about it, when you have the development of chronic pain, if we looked in the brain, we would see the formation of a highway, a new highway. And the goal is to get rid of that highway, the goal of treatment. And there are a lot of ways, bottom up and top down. And I like the metaphor, Dana, that you used once. One can think of a lot of, but think about it as, I don't know, if you're in LA, the 101 or the 405, a highway that's totally crowded. So you're sitting in your car and you can't move. You have pain and you feel stuck. You don't know what to do. Well, beginning to use other parts of your brain, whether you're doing art, whether you're listening to music, whether you're talking with a friend, whether even if you're playing a video game, in order to do that, you're using different routes off that highway. And the more routes you use, or the stronger you get involved in one of those routes, pretty soon the traffic begins to move. And if you have enough runoff highways, pretty soon you get rid of any of the traffic in that pain circuit.
So for parents at home who say, my child is stuck and they don't want to do anything, and they have now anxiety about going out for fear of pain, or they're in the pain cycle, right? Basically what we're saying is try to do anything, because any small thing gets you one step closer to being able to change lanes and create a new highway in the brain.
The one thing you don't want to do, two things, two rules for parents is, and having been a parent of 3 daughters, I can tell you our kids have gone through a variety of different pain problems at different times, that if your child is complaining about pain, but you notice he's involved in, or she's involved in talking with a friend or texting or listening to music and doing something, whatever you do, don't call attention to it, because it'll stop it right there. Don't say, oh, you must be feeling better, or I'm so glad that you were able to do that. Forget it. You want them to know that you understand their suffering, but they're still trying to do something else, even though they're suffering. And you don't want to suggest what they should do when they're in pain, because that's not the best time. It's catch them when they're not in pain, so that you might do something together, or say, I don't know, what is one thing you want to do today? Let's pick something, pacing, small. So maybe pick 4 things each day. Have the kid, your daughter or son, decide, have 4 things you want to do today, and that are easy to do, that maybe take 2 minutes each. Write it down, check it off, and it's up to you to do that. I'm happy to help. I know it's hard for you, but in other words, make your son or daughter a partner in the planning of how they're going to climb out of this. And you can be understanding and supporting, but don't do it for them. Don't remind them. Don't create the plan for them. They have to feel self-effective in climbing out of their pain with parent support.
That brings us back to the child that has the nausea, the headache, the stomach pain, and just is afraid to get out of bed. And how do parents use those tools you just described, but also somehow get creative in really baby steps? I remember trying to just get sitting up in bed as my goal, standing up, going to the bathroom, because they'll avoid to go to the bathroom. The baby steps can be minute, right? And that can still have an impact down the road.
Right. And somehow the goal is to get your child, your teenager, to start figuring out what their goals are. Do they want to spend their life in bed? And if not, what is one thing they think that they might be able to do? Even if it's, getting out of bed and sitting on a porta potty. You think they're going to want to do that much longer. Gradually, they can move the porta potty until they can make it to the bathroom. And I'm being, if we talk about really baby steps, I think it's the goal is really helping them develop what they see as a doable plan, creating a positive incentive for it, and nothing big, like if you go to the bathroom by yourself, I'll buy you a puppy. That's way too, like if you go to the bathroom yourself, that's fabulous. You get whatever, we could spend time, play a game together, or you get more TV time. I don't know, it's the idea is helping them be their own leader in creating the plan in a way that's baby steps and reasonable, and their own rewards within reason. And it doesn't need to be monetary rewards for actually making those accomplishments. So nothing is linear. You'll see progress going, and you're so excited. You don't want to call attention to it because that'll squash it right there. But you'll have some days, something will happen. There'll be a fight on the phone with a friend or something, and boom, they crash. But it's temporary crash because they've already been up. They'll go down and they'll come back gradually.
I think a lot of parents are really frustrated when their children who are suffering with pain get in bed and don't get out. And the default is TV. The default is avoidance. The teenage default is parents out too. And getting that child, I think one thing we can do, and we do with Zooms like this, is to help educate parents on what they can do to understand how the body's working, and that would definitely not be the time to push because they're in a heightened state. And if you could describe, if they're in a heightened state and their body is overreactive and that's why they're in pain, how could you educate parents right now to understand what that looks like inside the body so that they can take a step back knowing it's probably not going to get worse? But as parents, we can help motivate and help their body do this work to get off the highway.
Right. Well, I think somebody talked about CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome, where a child might have a minor injury, or surgery, maybe they don't even know how it happened, but suddenly a part of their body, a hand, a foot, a leg, starts becoming very sensitive and stabbing pain, electrical pain. We call this nerve signaling pain. And it's not in a nerve root distribution. It's in a part of the body, and that's why they call it complex regional, meaning a part of the body pain syndrome. And that is a purely brain-initiated pain circuit. So if you think about it, and now I almost forgot what your original question was, but the idea of what has happened, kind of like phantom limb pain. Think about the soldiers that had a leg blown off. Well, you have a memory loop of your leg. And whether you have a leg or not, you have all of the feelings in that memory loop. So, with or without the pain, the feeling part takes place in the brain. If you're comatose, you don't feel it because your brain isn't active. So the activity takes place there. And that's why a lot of people it sends signals down. And if they get a local block, that might help that for a while, but it doesn't erase the central pain circuit that's causing that. And that's what we want to work on. And we can work on that from the bottom up and the brain down. And I can go into more details, but I'd rather you ask me specific questions about where, how. But that's why we call it a sticky neural loop. That once the pain gets started, if we did functional MRI, we would see that loop. We do, and our research shows it. And that loop, the goal of treatment is to unstick the sticky neural loop, get the system back in balance so you can feel pain. That's protective, acute pain. You don't want to keep sticking your finger in the fire or keep slamming a door, unless you're clumsy like me, but on your finger. But, you want your acute pain system to be a warning, and then your pain turn-off system to turn it off. And what happens is our pain turn-off system poops out in chronic pain.
So for those kids, that's a great explanation of how the brain works. And I think for parents, it's really important to understand that before we try to parent a child who's in bed and escaping pain. I think most parents look at their kids and they say, well, you have such a bad headache, but you can watch TV. You could, but there's a lot to this for the brain. And I think understanding that helps us parent children that are going through different things. So for example, the child has fear of going out, and they're afraid that whatever initiated their pain cycling and their sticky neural loop now has risen to the place of anxiety, and they're afraid to go out or afraid to be in a social environment for fear the pain will be heightened.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's, if you want to say the smart brain pain syndrome, is that when kids hurt, they think about all the things that could make it worse. So if their stomach hurts, eating can make it worse. So there's worry about eating, expectation. If they go out, what if they have pain? If they're with friends, what if they have pain and they can't do whatever? And then there's all the embarrassment. So we call this anticipatory anxiety. And when you have anxiety of any kind, your body starts getting a rush of adrenaline, that fight or flight. We have our 3 parts of our nervous system, and I feel like I'm teaching a class, so don't cut me off. We have our motor nervous system, that's how we move our arms and legs, our body. We have our sensory, that's how we feel heat, temperature, movement, etc., pressure. And then we have our autonomic nervous system. And that's the part of our nervous system that's not under our conscious control. We can decide to move our arm or feel something or move it, but our autonomic nervous system is what keeps our breathing going and our heart beating and our blood vessels dilating when we're hot so we can sweat and get rid of some of the heat, or constrict when it's cold to conserve heat. And there are two parts to the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic, the fight or flight, that's the protective. If you're being chased by somebody, you're either going to freeze or you're going to run or you're going to fight, flight, or freeze, I think. But when you're in that mode, your body puts out a lot of adrenaline. And we know that a nervous system that's bathed in adrenaline increases pain signaling. So when you're anxious and you're worried about something, and you're anticipating something bad's going to happen, if you do this, you're going to hurt, if you do that, then just the thinking of that causes a rush of adrenaline, makes you feel more anxious, your heart speeds up, some people breathe faster, could even lead to a panic attack, but that makes the pain worse. We call it the self-fulfilling prophecy. Kids that think, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to take this test, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, likely will, because that's their mindset. And, as opposed to, I studied, I know the material, I'm scared, I'm worried, but I've studied, I know I can do it. And a lot of that is positive self-talk, which actually influences the brain.
I know Dr. Ziering brought up something really interesting that goes directly with this and the gut. So he was saying, and we know this to be true, and you've just talked about this, that if there's perception of pain or fear, and the body goes into fight or flight on that part of the autonomic system, and then you eat. I thought it was a very good description that would be the worst time to eat, because the body's signaling has said, I need all resources to go fight or flight. There is no rest and digest right now. So we're almost competing with our own systems and saying, oh, no, honey, you need to eat right now to be prepared for that test.
Yeah. So as I said, there are two parts to the autonomic nervous system: the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic, which is the restorative. When you're in parasympathetic mode, you're a little more relaxed, you have more blood flow in the vessels of your intestinal tract. When you meditate, when you're calm, when you're listening to music, you're happy. Then the sympathetic is quieter, and the parasympathetic, the restorative, takes over. But if you're in fight or flight mode and all of your blood, or a lot of your blood, is going to all your muscles, you don't have a lot of blood flow in the muscles of your intestinal tract. And so you're trying to eat, but things aren't working well. And it creates more pain. And either the muscles, and they're spasming, the sensory system, because of all that adrenaline, is on high alert. So your stomach's going to hurt even more when it does its normal contractions. So part of what kids have to learn is first of all, learning about their body and learning things that are self-soothing so they can develop timing of eating, and really almost relearning how to eat when they're calm and yet be able to exercise and move their body when it's between meals. And a lot of kids that are fearful of eating, you don't want them to eat a lot at one time, because then their stomach really has to work. So often what I call grazing, little bits of whatever. And if they've lost weight and are afraid to eat, it's almost like training their stomach and their mind to be able to eat again. So it almost doesn't matter in the beginning what they're eating. they're getting their stomach and their mind used to eating, and then gradually they'll be able to look at what they're eating so that they eat more healthfully. But in the beginning, if they've been avoiding food, you want them to learn to feel comfortable eating anything. So just getting their stomach trained, like physical therapy, to begin to eat normal meals again eventually.
Which the takeaway is to teach us as parents to learn how to parent in a different way as well. To parent to an autonomic nervous system is different than parenting to a non-compliant teen. And so as parents, we look at these children as non-compliant. They're not willing to do this. They're giving us a hard time. They're fine if they're with a friend, their pain doesn't hurt, or they're fine when they're in bed watching TV, but nothing else. And what I think you just gave us is a really good way to look at these children from parenting autonomic nervous systems, not you're supposed to eat at 8, 12, and 6, but what's going on with their bodies.
Right. I mean, think of the goal developmentally of adolescence is to develop a sense of identity and begin to develop a sense of autonomy. And if you're a kid and you have pain, you're, especially as a younger adolescent, where normally young adolescents, they want their parent, they don't want their parent, they want their, and the poor parent doesn't know if it's a moment of being seen as intrusive or needed. So it's a difficult time for parents and kids. And if they have pain, they both want their parents, even at age 16, but they don't want their parents because they're 16. So it's a push-pull. And as a parent, you don't always know when you're going to approach your son or daughter which mode they're in. And think about this. You don't want to feel like they're getting better. Is totally your responsibility, because that gives expectations to your child that you don't think he or she can do, or they can do it. And then the more you take over for them, the less they feel like they have the ability to get better, and the more they depend on you. And then they get angry with you if they're not getting better. So it's not easy, and that's where getting help. And we have a parent group that Dr. Levy, Samantha Levy runs on CHYP, and we have peer support groups where kids who are a little further along kind of, I've been there, this is what I used to be like, this is what I do now. So they support each other because they get it, they've been there. But the idea is, it's how to help your kid who has pain develop a sense of independence and self-efficacy. And that's where some parents just need guidance. It's not rocket science, but we don't automatically grow up to be childbearing and suddenly we're parents and we just know what to do. You love your kid, but how to be most helpful sometimes takes some guidance.
Well, and the guidance with food is really challenging. I mean, when Dr. Levy was on here the other day, I thought it was really important that she brought up something for all of us parents to remember. Our kids might get some food at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. And as a parent, we instantly want to say, don't eat now or don't eat junk late. But the reality is we really need to avoid that if we're in this disordered eating pattern. And we talk a lot about the kids that undereat because they're avoiding pain. But there's a lot of kids that will miss a meal or two and then overeat, and then they have the headache and the nausea and the stomach pain.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about the signaling, and as parents, how we can help that.
Yeah, it's one thing you don't want to do when they're in the middle of the act. You don't want to shame them for it, or you don't want to nag them about it. So it might be during a period when things are calm and you sort of sit with your kid and you're just talking. Maybe you're doing even playing cards or doing a board game together, or just hanging out or in the kitchen, and say, I noticed that, or better than you notice, ask them what they notice about, eating. It seems like, they eat more at night. Just what are your thoughts about that? The more you can get them to talk about what's going on, and the less judgmental you can be. You can talk about what you noticed without judging it in a negative way. And the idea is you want to be open communication with your child and have them, well, what are your thoughts about that? I noticed you said you had more pain. What are your thoughts about maybe doing it differently, or what do you think might help you begin to eat a little more during the day instead of at night? Because I noticed you really had a lot of pain before you went to sleep. Just, you don't want to tell them what to do. You want them to come up and know that they know that you know they're suffering and they're working hard, and you want to be there in a supportive way.
I mean, the common theme is these children need to be seen and heard, no matter what. I hear it with everything you say, and I think it's one of the most important pieces of medicine that we can give them. And I know as a parent who had a child with pain, I was afraid to draw an inference to the pain. But the reality is, as a parent, we're supposed to help their brain draw those links that if you ate this, your stomach hurt, but we can't say it that way. We have to say it over, you got to go right to go left, right? To get the brain to hear it in a new way.
Right. I just saw a note by Samantha, which I think is a good point. You want to let your child know that you're more invested in the child than in a particular behavior. There was a famous ecologist, Uri Brunfenbrenner, I'll get it, in child development, that said the most important thing to a kid is to know you love them, that their parent loves them. And it's so you want to help guide, like as Samantha said, a director guiding an actor, but you don't want to tell them, you got to do this, you got to do that. It's sort of the difference of a parent of letting your kid know you love them no matter what, and then how to guide them in a way that they begin to feel more self-effective.
I have dogs barking here, so I apologize. I had to mute for a second. I have a little French bulldog who's on a tear. I think the guiding is really important, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about parenting not in the moment, and not if they're already all systems go and heightened alert and they're in the autonomic dysfunction where the body's sending these perceived notions and chemicals to help protect, and then we say, now we have to push. Sometimes we have to walk out of the room to come back in a minute later. You get a fresh start. And I apologize. I have 5 dogs and they all are speaking right now too. I hope you can't hear them.
That's right. I think also it's a lot of behaviorists said you got to catch them when they're being good. I mean, for young kids, catch them when they're being good, not just always when they're being bad or naughty, So the idea is you want to also have time with your child when they're not in pain or when they're not super stressed. Don't heat it again, wait. When they're not super stressed, so that you're not creating a pairing of the only time they get one-on-one time with a parent is when they're in pain. So, you want to make sure that you have time, other times where you're interested in their child, not just their child in pain and the pain part.
Exactly. And I think I'd like to talk about how once the stomach gets triggered and you're in the pain cycle with the gut, right? How can parents use these creative healing modalities to change the patterning from not only from a day-to-day patterning, right? I mean, I think as most parents, we say, what can we do right now to make a difference? But I really feel that this is a dimmer switch and not an on-off switch. And how do we turn the dial a little bit today so that eventually it's on all the way or off all the way?
Right, right. So, that's where you really use the creative brain. And that's where, that's why we developed the foundation nonprofit called Creative Healing for Youth in Pain. Think about this, Paul, can you not do that? If you're always focused, if you're a kid and you feel like your life is run by your pain, if I eat, I'm going to hurt. If I hurting and I'm with a friend, I can't do what they're doing. I don't think I can do school today because I'm in so much pain from wherever. You end up as a kid feeling like the pain is running your life. And the goal is for you to run your life, not the pain. So you want to help your child develop a sense of self-efficacy. And that's not going to happen if the parent takes over. So it's a fine balance knowing your child's personalities and how together you can be partners with guiding your child, helping your child come up with some of the ideas, because you want to get rid of that anticipatory fear which blocks. And some of the creative ways, for example, helping kids use their imagination. And one of the strategies, we call this hypnosis, but it's really, all hypnosis is not what you see on TV. It's helping kids learn to use their imaginative brain. So it's like a kid who loves soccer, had an injury, the injury healed, and now they have CRPS of their foot. They love soccer, but they can't play, they can't even walk. So in their imagination, they can picture themselves on the soccer field because they've done it so much. So they can imagine themselves and get in the feeling of what it was like hearing the team really scoring the goal, kicking the goal, and the feeling of running, the sun on your face, the cool wind as you're running, the idea of being really developing your sense of imagination. And that might then develop into eating, maybe imagining yourself tasting, licking a favorite ice cream or something flavorful. And so the idea of first in your imagination to, again, you're training another part of your brain instead of the pain circuit and the anticipatory anxiety, so that they can move from imagining something to begin to take baby steps to do this something until they can do a little more, and their brain learns to do it more calmly, and they learn that disaster doesn't happen, so they can do a little more. It's all baby steps.
And the baby steps are critical. I'm seeing a lot of questions that all tie into one common theme, even though they're different questions. And the common theme is going back to, if the child isn't going to do anything because they have such fear, what do you do? And that really is those baby steps. It's a microscopic step that may be different than what you always did.
Mhm.
That creates the change.
Right. It's like if you have a fear, or even if you develop panic, then first of all, you get a big outpouring. The more anxious you are, the more fearful, the more you have anticipatory anxiety. You start bathing your nervous system and your body with adrenaline. So already you haven't even done anything, your pain is worse, whatever. And the idea of overcoming that anticipatory fear with cognitive behavioral therapy, you learn strategies of self-talk. I've done this before. I've been able to manage it. I know I can do it again. Baby steps. And there's something called self-compassion. I'm not perfect. Parents need to learn self-compassion also. I'm not perfect, but maybe it won't work out well every time, but sometimes it will, because I know it has in the past. And it's baby steps with some self-reward. And the reward may be just acknowledging you did it, good for you. And parents need to learn baby steps also and reward themselves for, whoa, she didn't blow up at me this time. That's a pretty big deal. So the idea of pacing, which is really critical.
Would you say that on the parent side, if we have a child that is in bed for whatever reason or has this pain syndrome, and we've always done it one way, maybe those baby steps could be that we need to do it a little differently too, right? That we need to reevaluate how we're approaching and try something new, because they're an ever evolving system, but we might still be parenting one way.
Right. And also our kids grow. And during adolescence is probably a huge period of growth. So at the beginning of a pain problem, how you parented might be different 6 months later. And your daughter or son or they is different than how they were 6 months earlier. And sort of taking a fresh look. And you're a parent of now a little bit older adolescent. What does that mean? How do you do it differently? The other is, I really have to say, as a parent, you see your kids suffering, and it's stressful, and it makes you anxious, and you feel often helpless, like you should be a good parent. I'm not a good parent if I see my kids suffering and I can't help them. And so you don't want them to suffer, but your own anxiety and feelings of helplessness, even if you keep it to yourself, your kid is smart, they'll pick up on it. So now they're holding on to your anxiety and their anxiety. And so the idea of self-compassion and really doing some things that nurture yourself and self-forgiveness, in the sense that we're not all perfect and we all make mistakes. And the important thing is learn from your mistakes and don't keep beating yourself up over it, because that does not help your child.
It doesn't. And I think that everybody here who's taken time to join a Zoom today is really looking for that help. I think maybe we can spend the last few minutes here talking about creative and different ways that maybe people didn't know existed that help break this pain syndrome. Again, whether it's headaches, stomach aches, both, nausea or anticipatory, it all has somewhat of the same resolution process when it comes to creative ways to help children in pain.
Yeah, and first of all, we think about, there's a lot of research that says for chronic pain for any age person, you need what's called not the biomedical model. Medications themselves rarely long-term solve the problem. So you want to change the neurobiology. You want to change this electrical signaling system rather than just cover it up temporarily. And they call it biopsychosocial model because there's sort of by understanding the biology of what's going on, the neural signaling, the psychology, the impact of pain or anticipation of pain, and anxiety, depression, sleep problems, differences in eating patterns, social isolation. There are a lot of psychological sequelae, or some of those that might have been there that also contributed to the development of pain, come before or after. Depression, if you begin to feel isolated from peers, lonely, alone, it's depressing. You can't do all the things you normally used to do. It's, and then if it can influence your relationship to food and sleep. If you're not getting good stage 3 restorative sleep, your body cannot rebalance itself. So the idea of our brains are more than just pain signaling centers, and our bodies are more than just receptacles for pain. The idea that we know that if we use our muscles, that even though if you haven't used it for a while, any of us, it's going to hurt, but that's good hurt versus danger hurt. And the more you do, the more energy you have, the more you're getting signals, healthy signals up to your brain that's altering that pain circuit. The more creative things you do, writing, drawing, singing, music, social connection, the more you're reprogramming at the brain. And social connection, connectedness, and feeling not alone is an important part of the healing process. So the whole goal is to rebalance a neural brain-body signaling system that's gotten out of balance. But there are lots of ways of getting it in balance, and that's the goal of treatment for chronic pain.
And it's a small little turn of the dial each time. And I think as parents, we're so afraid that the other shoe's going to drop. I'm seeing somebody saying that they find themselves concerned that it's going to happen again, and that they're a little gun shy. I'm sure a lot of parents have PTSD from experience, and then are they behind? And I think what you said before is so important, that our holding space and being calm and not walking in and dealing with our kids in those moments is so important. A question came up, Dr. Zeltzer, about, do you see this happen more often with kids and adolescents because of hormones? And does that give a little hope at the end that when it passes, that this too shall pass?
Yeah, hormones, obviously, we know that women beginning during adolescence and onward through young adulthood anyway, middle adulthood, have more pain problems than men, and also have more body areas that hurt, more different pain problems over time, and more pain. And there's some suggestion that girls or people, adolescents who have really bad period cramps, for some, that's a setting stage, which may be for other kinds of pain. So it may be because you have so much pain because of prostaglandins, a uterine muscle contraction, that you're sending all these signals every month to your brain. So maybe you're training your brain and developing a pain circuit. We don't know. Or the hormones that change during adolescence with periods. Certainly we know that blocking the hormones with turning off periods with, straight through hormone replacement where you're not getting a period for can help reduce some of the other pain. Certainly, not everybody who has chronic pain also has period cramps, and not everybody with period cramps has chronic pain. So it's contributory. It was thought that testosterone is pain protective. And, in the past, when the men were hunters and the women were gatherers, the men needed that testosterone as a protection against pain because they were out there hunting the wild animals. It's probably more of a combination, and there are girls that are born with adrenal glands that are producing more testosterone, but they don't have less pain. So it's much more complex, and I think the whole pain signaling system we're learning is really complex, and it's not as easy. We have genetic markers. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a good example. Kids that are super hyper flexible that don't have the serious Ehlers-Danlos, but they're hypermobile. So they may be dislocating certain joints. Well, that's painful. And whether you have the diagnosis or not, you need physical therapy to learn to strengthen the muscles to hold in the loose joints. But there are a lot of people that are just hypermobile. They don't dislocate, but they tend to have more musculoskeletal pain. So the idea of learning about yourself, your unique neurobiology, your kids on the autism spectrum can be super, super bright. And we call it atypical neurobiology. Most of the very famous people are on the spectrum, and they easily form sticky neural loops, but for them it may be a little harder to unstick it. Doesn't mean it can't be. And the sticky neural loop helps them do positive things because they can practice the piano for hours and become a famous pianist, whereas others would give up. So it's learning about yourself, learning about your child, and really celebrating their strengths and helping with some of their weaknesses in areas that they can begin to learn how to help themselves.
Well, this has been a really interesting and different approach to pain that I think most people are used to hearing. So Dr. Zeltzer, I thank you as always for the incredible amount of information that you've gathered in your career and sharing it with all of us live like this, where we can take actual questions live. And I see one more, and it might be a good one to, the last question might be a good one to send through the admin at mychip.org. And we're here as a community to help everybody and help everybody help their children. As I'll kick it back to Georgia to again reiterate some of the programs that we have that I think a lot of parents will find helpful at just seeing how other people have learned how to turn the dial a little bit and getting creative. So I think on that, I will say thank you to everybody, and thank you. Georgia, back to you.
Thank you so much, Dana and Dr. Zeltzer, for that very informative presentation. And thank you, everybody, for joining us and sharing your questions. As Dana mentioned, you can email us at admin@mychip.org to learn more about any of our programs or services. This event concludes our Abdominal Pain, Anxiety, and How to Help Your Team During COVID-19 series. We will be sending out the recordings over email in the next week. Keep an eye out for those in your inbox. please feel free to contact us with any questions. You can follow CHYP on social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and you can check out our website by visiting mychip.org. And thank you so much again, Dr. Zeltzer and Dana, for taking the time to speak with us today. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.